Welcome to week 10 and unit 4. And I should say, here we go. Get ready for the big push. This is going to be the beginning of the end. And for some of you, you're probably excited about that. For some of you, maybe it's bittersweet, I hope. Having a chance to write is actually a precious opportunity in your life. And so I hope that we can really move forward in confidence and building on what we've learned over these first 3 units. Writing the remembered event paper, the profile paper, and the literary analysis. Especially we want to connect to the literary analysis, which was kind of your first chance to do the kind of research that you'll need to do using texts and combining them, synthesizing them, and forming an argument. With your profile, you also did research, but this is going to be an argumentative essay, and that doesn't mean that you're hostile. It means that you have a position. And so we're going to talk here. This is your overview video for the unit, and we're going to talk about how to organize an argument, how to support it with claims, data, and warrants. So as you can see, this PowerPoint comes from OWL, not OWL at CUI, but OWL at Purdue. And this is an incredible online writing resource for every class that you take that requires you to write, which is going to be probably a majority of the classes that you have at Concordia. In fact, I still use OWL to this day. I use it as a teacher of my middle school students, but I also use it as a graduate student in a PhD program. So why do I use it? Well, number one, it has very clear instructions on using the MLA, which is still the system that I use to this day. Now, if you're in another field like the social sciences or history or medicine or law, of course you're going to have your own system that's tailored to the needs of that field. So beware and be wary that you can't always just do the same thing. You've got to make sure with your professor what you need to do. The APA is the other system, and that's usually what you use for education. So some of you, if you're planning on maybe doing something with education, that's a system you'll use. So what is an argument? I mean, bottom line, an argument is having an opinion and putting forward that opinion because someone's going to challenge it. You know, having an opinion that everybody agrees with, that doesn't take much work. So an argument involves something that needs to be supported and explained because it's being contested. And so an argument establishes mainly the process of you establish a claim and then you prove it through 3 things: logical reasoning, examples, which means evidence and data, but then also research. Now, your research can also result in data. So I want to kind of point you back to the scientific method that Francis Bacon came up with so many centuries ago. Basically, the idea is you start with a question about your world, and then you seek to answer that question through research, but then obviously you need to share that conclusion. Whatever conclusions you come up with, you have to share that with others. And to do that, you have to backtrack and you have to make sure that you have support. So, you form a hypothesis in science. And so it's kind of the same thing when you are writing in English or history. You have a claim about the content that you are discussing. So if it's a story, then you have a claim about the story and what it means, or why it was written, or what impact it has. So that's what you did for your literary analysis. So why is it so important to have organization in an argument? You know, a lot of people, when they are discussing, they just say their feelings. And if they believe in something, they say it louder. I hope that some of you have had a chance to watch political debates and you understand the process of responding to other people and having to have a quick answer, but a clear answer. And so having organization kind of helps clarify your own thinking. And you build on premises. You build on things that are givens, like in geometry when you're doing a proof, but maybe it's something that everyone pretty much can agree on. You start there, and then you continue to build toward the point you want to make. So, organization guides an audience. And your audience, in this case, is a reader, but maybe if you're a political candidate, it could be the whole country or even the whole world. You're trying to convince them of your reasoning. In addition, it offers a clear explanation of each point. And so you may think that something's obvious, but you can't assume. You know what assuming does for us, okay? And the fact that it's foolish. It's foolish to make assumptions. You've always got to analyze your own assumptions when you're making an argument, and that's very helpful too. So you want to clearly explain why you are saying what you're saying. That doesn't mean being pedantic, okay? It doesn't mean explaining things that everybody should know, because then it sounds like you're talking down to someone. So the point is, be clear and concise, efficient. Also, you need to demonstrate your own credibility. And we call this ethos. Ethos it goes back to Aristotle and the ancient Greeks, the idea of ethos, logos, and pathos. Maybe you guys have talked about that at some point in your academic career. But the idea here is ethos is your credibility, your wisdom that you are sharing to others. And so when you have clear arguments, which is actually logos, it adds to your ethos. So they're complementary. When you have clear reasoning based on facts, you can demonstrate that you have stature, whether it's as a scientist or an educator or a politician. So in your argument position paper, which we're also going to call a research paper, and we're also going to call it something called the OOPS. Okay, I've mentioned this earlier in an earlier overview. The idea is you have an ongoing, overarching project, paper, or study. Okay, and so this is what you have basically been set up to accomplish. By doing those first 3 papers, we're ready to do the rest of the course, which is the second half. And so obviously, when you write any paper, you need to have a title. And your title, in my opinion, your title should at least have a portion that's creative, that gets our attention, that shows your creative voice. The rest of the paper is very straightforward. It's just like any essay. You have an introduction with a thesis statement at the end. Now, I have been teaching you, and I would expect that you'd have actually 2 sentences at the end of your introduction. And that would be your thesis statement, which is a clear opinion statement, basically saying where you stand on a position. And then the last sentence of your introduction should be called your forecasting statement. I sometimes call it a map, which basically outlines how you're going to address your topic and how you're going to support your claim, your main claim. The body paragraphs are, honestly, it seems repetitive. The body, though, should be organized very clearly. In a 5-paragraph essay that you may have written in high school, you had exactly 3 body paragraphs. Well, in an 8 to 10 page paper, that is impossible. You don't want to have paragraphs that are a page or more long. So the point here is that you're going to have sections to your paper. Those sections will have multiple paragraphs that are connected. You connect through a variety of cueing devices that we've talked about already. And so you want to make sure you have transitional expressions and things like that. You are allowed to have headings for this paper, but don't let the headings take the place of transitional expressions. If I see that you are just using headings and then the paragraphs are still disconnected, it's not going to have the same impression. And so how do you write a paragraph within each section of your paper? Each paragraph is a unit. You need to have a topic sentence for each paragraph. You need to have some effect or impression that you're trying to achieve through that paragraph. And so it's very important, in my opinion, in my experience, that you have an outline. Your outline should guide you to make these topic sentences. And so a thesis statement is kind of the topic sentence for your whole essay. What I honestly have always taught students, if you take a really well-crafted paragraph with a topic sentence and then points made in that paragraph and transitions connecting the points, and even a clincher sentence at the end of the paragraph to sum it up. Well, what you can do is you can call that an accordion paragraph, and just like an accordion, you can stretch it out so that that becomes an essay. And the way you do that is just fleshing out more details and more examples and more fine points. And so basically, if you are able to write an excellent paragraph, you should be able to write an excellent essay of really any length. And someday, your master's thesis might be 150 pages long. So it's all about structure, and this basic structure is what you build on. You want to build your main point from your topic sentence, and it should be clear throughout the paragraph that every sentence is supporting that main point. And in the same way, every paragraph should support your thesis. You've always got to ask yourself, is this supporting my point? And not just extra interesting information that I added to get enough length so my paper's long enough. Now, one thing that you also have to do, and this goes back to the Toolman method that we discussed last unit. If you watched the YouTube, if you looked at the document that I posted on the announcements, in that method, you want to anticipate arguments against your argument, so opposition to your argument. You need to know both sides. I like, in many debates that I would have in a class, I like students to not know which side they're going to be on, and to have to pick an issue, and then only later on in the process do they find out which side they're on. So basically, you're researching both sides. That's the mindset that you have to have. So pick something you're passionate about, but also don't be so closed off that you refuse to consider other opinions and other sides. It's important that you're able to target those other opinions and say why your opinion is superior in some way. Okay? Finally, you have a conclusion, and the conclusion shouldn't just repeat. The conclusion should provide some sort of extension and application to our lives, and to, basically you're responding finally in light of everything you've said in the essay. So everything that you've said kind of builds up to that conclusion. So it's not just a repetition, although there is a little bit of a mirroring that goes on between the conclusion and the introduction. Okay, so how can you write an effective title, and why you need one? Well, your title is going to introduce the topic to the audience. And again, I believe that number 2 is the most important. You want to have a creative portion. And what I have often required of students, I would highly, highly, highly recommend this for you. Have the first section of your title, so maybe 2 or 3 words, be creative, then have a colon, then have a descriptive title. Okay? Now, the examples they give don't have a huge amount of creativity. If your topic is a clean campus, and then your basic premise is cleaning up campus with recycling, that's fine. That's adequate as a title. But the next one maybe gets a little bit closer. Okay, reducing rubbish. That is alliteration, and it's kind of catchy. Now, you don't want to do that all the time. We can overuse alliteration where you repeat the first sound, the R, reducing rubbish, recycling, okay? But notice the first part is kind of creative and pithy, and then you have the colon, and then you have a description of what exactly this is going to be about. Okay, so they're guiding you here to say, imagine that you have just written a paper, and it's about road rage. That's your topic. And remember, a topic is not enough for a thesis. You need to say something about that topic. So, is road rage enough for your topic? Can't drive 55. Or road rage curing our highway epidemic. Or is there another one that you think would be the best of all possible worlds? Okay, honestly, I really like the second one, but it doesn't say enough. And say your essay were published and then people searched for it on Google, if they searched for road rage, they're not going to find your essay unless you've tagged it somehow. You guys know all about tagging and hashtagging. So the point here is, how can you accomplish both goals? I think that road rage, curing our highway epidemic, is good. It has good imagery with an epidemic going on. and road rage is essentially alliteration. But I think you could probably do can't drive 55, curing our highway epidemic. You know, hard to say, because can't drive 55, maybe that doesn't say enough about road rage. I'll leave it up to you, but consider what a good title is. And you don't have to do this first. Do it at the end, or do it as you write. Maybe there'll be a cool phrase that you use that you realize, hey, that's my title. Kind of like To Kill a Mockingbird, if you've ever read that book. You're reading along and you realize, boom, this story by Atticus, this is where the title comes from, and it makes sense now. Okay, so your introduction is obviously very important, and you need to hook the reader. So I like to use the first few sentences of an introduction to build some background, maybe give some interesting facts, maybe use an anecdote, maybe ask a question or two or three. The point is you're engaging the reader right away. Don't assume that they're going to be naturally interested in what you have to say. The main thing, though, is that it's a plan. You need to tell your readers what you are going to tell them. Okay, so this is kind of, maybe you've heard sermons like this, that how to give a speech or a sermon is tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them, and then tell them what you told them. Okay, so that's introduction, body, conclusion. And I think that that's still pretty sound advice. And notice the conclusion then is review, it is summary, but it's not just repeating like a robot. Okay, so just to review, know that anecdotes do really get a lot accomplished. That's why so many pastors use anecdotes in their sermons. It could be a hypothetical situation, not necessarily a real one. It could be something you get off the internet. Just make sure that it's not one that people have heard multiple times and are desensitized to. You can start with a question, a quotation, shocking statistics, a striking image. Maybe you mention a famous allusion. Okay, that might be an anecdote, but it could also just be something that your audience is already acquainted with. So your thesis statement is the main sentence of your paper. That's why on October 31st, we remember the Reformation happening then. I mean, it's a world-changing event, and rarely in the course of history have you had one day change things so much. But when Martin Luther took his hammer, a nail, and a piece of paper and tacked it to the castle church in Wittenberg, Germany, which wasn't Germany, it was, I think Saxony at that time. I mean, it was an important moment because those 95 statements weren't just his opinions. He knew that they would be hotly contested and that he could be in trouble and maybe his life would be in danger. So the point is, it was important, and your thesis should be important. It lets the reader know what's coming, what your whole paper is about, and they should keep going back to that. And they're going to hold you accountable. If you drift, if you have paragraphs that don't go back to your thesis, they're going to know, and it's not going to be an effective essay. So you have to answer the question, what are you trying to prove? And so it comes from your research question. You have a question saying, okay, what effects does an abundance of food have in the United States? Okay, that kind of goes with our unit topic, right? One of the discussion topics. And there are a lot of consequences, but you're probably going to want to narrow it down to the fact that abundance makes us complacent to need, something like that. And then you want to prove it. You want to show that people, they have so much abundance that they're not aware that there's poverty. And so maybe your whole methodology in your research is going to be surveying people, find out what they know, and then look at other sources to find out whether people really understand that there's poverty in the United States and hunger. It's not a factual statement. Now, I'll be honest. Anytime you use an adjective, you're basically making an opinion statement. I tell my students that, and they're like, what, really? Now, that's not like, the adjective red. Okay, that is a red flower or something like that. Although even that's debatable. People have different shades of colors, and they blur together. I mean, if you look at the spectrum, you understand that. So saying that something is big, well, big compared to what? Because many people would think something that's big is small based on their experience. So usually an adjective can get things stirred up. And so it's not a factual statement, it's a claim, and it has to be proven through your paper. That is your job. So your thesis statement guides the reader through your argument, and it's located in the introduction of your paper. And I'm pretty strict about this for this introductory course. As you get more comfortable, you'll be able to experiment. But for right now, let's stick to the second to last sentence of your introduction is your thesis. I will look for it there. The last statement then is not going to be your thesis statement, it's going to be your forecasting statement. It's connected to the thesis statement. Sometimes people combine the two. I want you to have a separate thesis in a separate forecasting statement. And so that's what we're going for here, to make it very clear so that you have something to build on for the future. Okay, so take some time here to think about this argument. It's quite dated. Maybe you don't even know what a V-chip is. It's something that was hotly contested. It was something that was put forward by former Vice President Al Gore's wife, Tipper Gore. And she was a proponent of having these V-chips so that parents could control what children watch. So I don't know if V stood for violence or what. The point is that it was technology at the time that could help parents control the inputs. And so, parents, they couldn't always watch. Okay, so the thesis would be, parents often too busy to watch television shows with their families can monitor their children's viewing habits with the aid of the V-chip. Okay, that could be a thesis. How about this one? To help parents monitor their children's viewing habits, the V-chip should be a required feature for television sets sold in the United States. Last one. This paper will describe a V-chip and examine the uses of the V-chip in American-made television sets. Well, I think we can kind of understand it's number 2 that's the winner of, the dating game here. And the point is that the first one is saying something that is true, and it's like a report. And it's true. It's almost like a news report. Nothing wrong with that, but it's not an argument. It's not a position. The last one, kind of the same thing. In fact, saying this paper will describe is kind of a kiss of death, in my opinion. When you have to explain what you're going to explain, I think you need to stop and realize that it should speak for itself. So try not to say, this paper will say, this paper will state. Just do it. Okay. What do your body paragraphs do? They build. They keep building on your thesis. And you want to organize them in a way that gains momentum. You don't want to have your most important, your best sourced argument at the beginning, and then you taper off and get weaker and weaker. Okay, this is an inverted pyramid like a newspaper article where a lot of people don't have time to get to the end. They're going to want to have momentum and build toward a climax. Okay, and so you build upon claims made in the introduction, following the map, the forecasting statement, and then you want to organize using those topic sentences in transitional expressions. Okay, offering some explanation of recent developments in the topic. Basically, we call this a literature review. If you have that early on, and what I mean by literature review, it's not like James Joyce literature. It's anything that's been written or said in the field about your topic. If you want to quickly review that and maybe mention a couple of important people who have discussed it, that's a very common way that people write research reports or argument papers. And so the audience right away can see that not everybody agrees and says the same thing, and that your position maybe fills a gap in the research. So you can order paragraphs in different ways depending on what you want to do. You can go from the general to the specific. There's momentum there, easing the readers into it. Maybe you want to start with the most important and go to the least important, but I'll be honest, I think that's the least effective way. A newspaper article, a magazine article, perhaps wants to get your attention and knows that you're flipping through, but I think the first and the last style is probably the best. Now, addressing what other people might say in opposition to your argument. It's diffusing bombs. You're on the bomb squad. And you want to diffuse those bombs or those landmines before they go off, before people discover, hey, there's a different way of thinking about this. You have credibility if you can show that you have a breadth of knowledge and you understand that people don't agree with you, and that you've researched multiple sides and you've come to an informed decision, that you've considered other points of view, but that you're still able to decide. Okay, saying that people don't agree and you, the reader, can disagree if you want to, that really weakens your ethos. You want to have some strong street cred here. So how can you put a counter argument in your paper? It's possible to actually introduce it right off the bat. But it can be, anywhere really in your paper. But one thing that you can do is kind of go back and forth, kind of like tennis, a tennis match, ping pong game, whatever. You have your main point after you've introduced the counter argument, or vice versa. Okay, so you could have your point and then the counterpoint. I think probably you want the counterpoint, or what some people say, and then come up with yours, so that, again, within each section you have momentum. So either way is fine. Either you offer your point and then have the counterpoint, or you offer the counterpoint as the kind of the first thing, and then you come up with yours. So you really want to understand your audience. Every time you write, every time you speak in front of a group, you need to know that you need to respect the opinions of your audience. And if they have concerns, if some of the opposition arguments show that some people in the audience may have those same concerns, then you're doing them a service by acknowledging them, but also it's very savvy, right? It's wise, kind of crafty if you acknowledge those opinions as having some validity. So obviously you don't want to turn people off. You want to be tactful yet firm. This has often been called political correctness. And I think that this is a point where we can say, okay, being politically incorrect, is that going to be effective? I mean, you absolutely limit the base of people who are going to listen to you if you are politically incorrect and you stomp all over, walk all over people's views and say, only I am the right one. So being tactful it's not just crafty, it's wise, it's polite. I think that these are things that are part of our civic discourse that we're in danger of losing. So research is the backbone of everything you do, and it's that's why it's called a research paper. Now, in high school, a research paper was often just a report. This is something that it sounds wide open from the beginning, and you have to make everything specific. You have to flesh it out. So you want to research to find out the details. Those aren't going to be handed to you. You'll see that the 20 possible topics that are given to you in this unit, they are pretty general, and you have to figure out exactly what is being said. And that can be fun. It can also be frustrating. You want to research to support your claims. So maybe you have some opinions, but you need to make sure that you continue the research throughout your writing of this paper. Don't just rest on the first source that you find. Make sure that you have enough corroboration from a variety of sources. That's why we're requiring 8 to 10 sources. So your conclusion is re-emphasizing, right? It's telling people what you told them. And summarizing is a good start, but you can't simply summarize. It just sounds like you're being redundant. So you want to have a call to action. You want to speculate on what might be out there in the future. Extrapolate when appropriate. I mean, you don't want to be fanciful, and you certainly don't want to say, oh, by the way, I forgot to mention blah, blah, blah. That's the kiss of death. You don't want to raise new claims in your conclusion that you haven't actually talked about. But sometimes asking questions that are new questions can work. Leaving people realizing that those questions build on what you've already said and support the idea that that your way of thinking is superior to other ways of thinking. So here again, you see OWL at Purdue. It is an authority. And honestly, I am reading constantly in my PhD program of scholars on composition and rhetoric from University of Purdue. There are some of the leading scholars there, and so they've designed this online writing lab. It's been around for 20 years. This is something that is the culmination of a lot of hard work, trying to make writing, and argumentative writing especially, make it accessible to students everywhere. And so please use this site. Realize that it's not just limited to this class. This is something that can be a springboard to your future. Thanks for watching. I hope this overview, even though it was a little longer, I hope it was helpful as we move forward, and realize that you should begin reading in the craft of research and read a lot of chapters this unit. You should also be choosing your topic before next Sunday, and we'll have a live session to kick things off, and we'll be talking about our topics and how all this writing ties together, and how the first 3 assignments have prepared you for what you're going to be doing. So thanks again for watching, and please tune in on Wednesday so that we can have a class together and make some great progress.